And welcome in one of the best in the business from NBC Sports, and that's Pierre McGuire. Pierre, Zach, Gelb, Hayley, Condon, how you doing?
Good to talk with you, gentlemen.
Well, great to have you on. And Ilya Bryzgalov, he's been a topic of conversation here in Philadelphia, and he had a big dispute with the media the other day in his farewell press conference. There is that amnesty clause possibly out there. Do you think the Flyers go that route with one as Ilya Bryzgalov?
I think most people would probably read the tea leaves and say, yeah. You look at the fact they traded for Steve Mason. You look at the fact they signed Mason to a way under market value extension. I'd say most people reading the situation would say, yeah, wouldn't be surprising to see Bryzgalov get bought out.
Well, this was the Flyers team. They made the playoffs last year, and they beat a pretty darn good Pittsburgh Penguins team. And this year they're on the outside looking in. They didn't make the playoffs. What changed with this Flyers team?
Not having Chris Pronger, not having Matt Carl, not having James Van Riemsdyk, having a lot of injury situations to players like Scotty Hartnell and to Danny Briere. They just didn't have a lot of hockey luck this year. They had some guys that really accelerated the pace of their play going forward. It's got to be real exciting for the Flyers and their fan base. I'm thinking of Wayne Simmons in particular. I thought Braden Shen got better as the season went along. But injuries really hurt that team a lot. You know, Giroux's a superstar player, but again, he wasn't surrounded with nearly the same supporting cast. It took a while for Luke Shen to get comfortable, but once he did start to get comfortable, you were looking at a defenseman that was playing between 25 and 30 minutes per game, which is a lot of ice time, and he handled it really well. That's very positive. So there's more positives. I know people are hurting now because there's no playoffs. Far more positives with the Flyers than negatives, I think, going forward, and never overreact to a short sample size. And a 48-game season is a short sample size.
How do you specifically think that the shortened season affected the Flyers' chances of making the playoffs?
A lot, because you see some of the teams that started to hit the skids here, including Montreal and Toronto, who made it because it was a short season. If it's an extended season, they probably don't go anywhere with it. So that's part of the problem. And again, with Philadelphia, they just started to get some guys healthy. Jake Voracek had a tremendous season for them. They got to be really excited about that. Matt Reed coming off injury, again, looking better as the season went along. They were starting to get more stable in goal with Mason. So again, I do think the 48 games hurt them a lot. But again, don't overreact to the short seasons. I've seen too many people do that. I was coaching in the league the last time. A lot of teams overreacted either to their success or to their failures, and they set their franchises back a long way from the overreaction to 94, 95, but the last time we had a 48-game schedule.
Zach, Gelb, Hayley, Condon here with you, Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP, talking to Pierre McGuire of NBC Sports. And Pierre, now let's get to some of the playoff matchups. The Rangers take on the Capitals. These two teams are very familiar with one another. And I look at this goalie matchup with Holtby and Lundqvist. This looks like to be another good one this year.
That should be a great series. I mean, you've got a rookie coach in Oates against an experienced coach in Tortorella. You've got the #1 power play in the league with the Washington Capitals. That's really helped stimulate Alex Ovechkin. The one thing nobody's talking about is where Washington got all their wins. They were 15-3 against the Southeast Division. They were 3 games under 500, not counting shootout or overtime losses against the rest of the Eastern Conference. So they were able to pile up a plethora of points against a weaker division, the weakest division in hockey. That's something that hasn't been talked about. The Rangers are starting to find their mojo. They've been a much better team since the trade deadline and some of the huge deals they made, including bringing Ryan Clohan, bringing Derek Brassard in, bringing John Moore, and moving Marian Gaborik out. So I expect this is going to be a long, hard, tough series. And I would say that you touched on something that's really important. Probably the best goalie will win, whether it's Lundqvist or whether it's Holtby.
Like you mentioned, I thought it was the right move by the Rangers and Glenn Sather to get rid of Marian Gaborik. He necessarily just didn't fit in so well with the Rangers. You mentioned the offensive change that's happened with this team. What has changed specifically with this Rangers offense since the trade?
Well, more depth. I mean, they lost Brandon Pruss, they lost Johnny Mitchell, and they didn't have a very good Marian Gaborik. They had 3 players that weren't in their lineup basically from a season ago, and all those players really helped the Rangers. Mitchell was way underrated, Pruss was outstanding, and Gaborik was a 40-plus goal scorer. He was a shell of himself this year. They needed more depth. They knew that, and they went out and addressed it. You know, Brassard as the #3 center has been huge for them. So now you go Stepan, Richards, Brassard. Brassard's a #1 or #2 center on a lot of teams. He's playing as a 3 in New York. The other thing that's really important is Johnny Moore. He insulates their defense. Johnny Moore will end up being a poor man's Ryan McDonough. McDonough's a tremendous player. Watch for that matchup against Ovechkin this entire series. But the biggest thing is that they knew in the Ranger dressing room that they were having issues, the coach and Gaborik, and it was affecting the rest of the chemistry on the team. Now they don't have that issue to deal with anymore.
Looking at all of the playoff matchups as a whole, I mean, after we saw an A-seeded team win the Cup last year, do any low-seeded teams stick out as potential Cup contenders this year?
It's a great question. What'll be interesting to watch is if you think that St. Louis is a lower-seeded team or LA's a lower-seeded team. It depends on how you view it, or maybe San Jose. But that St. Louis series with Los Angeles is going to be very, very nasty. So it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that. The Ranger-Washington series will be really interesting to see who comes out of that. But I don't see the same kind of deep teams coming out like Los Angeles did last year. Let's be honest, Los Angeles never should have been an 8 seed last year. They were underachieving. They got their coach fired. The coaching change really mattered for their team. But I would say that you're not going to see a repeat of Los Angeles from last year. I'd be shocked if you did.
And if you had to give me one team in the East other than Pittsburgh to get to the Stanley Cup Finals, who's that one team that you like besides Pittsburgh?
Well, I don't make predictions because I got to work between all the teams. I work down low on the field of play, basically, so don't make predictions. But one team that I think will be very dangerous, even though they're not playing well right now, Boston. If Boston gets out of the first round healthy and unscathed, because I expect them to be in a very physical series with Toronto, but if they get out of that series, I'd say the Boston Bruins are going to be very, very dangerous.
What is your take on the New York Islanders? We saw them sort of finishing the season pretty strongly. Do you think they'll be potential Cup contenders at all against Pittsburgh?
Cup contenders? I think that's a stretch. Chance to win in the first round? Probably not. But they're a year ahead of where most people thought they would be. John Tavares is a superstar. He's got great chemistry with Matt Molson. The Backups been excellent in goal for them. Their defense is very underrated. Andrew MacDonald is one of the more underrated guys in the league. Travis Hamonic, another underrated guy. Their power play's been tremendous all year. Dougie Waite, their assistant coach, deserves a lot of credit. But to say they're Cup contenders or even a legitimate threat to be Pittsburgh, I think would be a reach.
Let me ask you one more question right before we let Pierre McGuire go, because I know you're pressed for time today, and we appreciate you giving a few minutes. You see Sidney Crosby, he's been up and down with injuries so far this season. Do you have an update on Sidney Crosby and when he could possibly return to the ice?
Well, a lot of it depends on what happens with the doctors today. He's got a doctor's appointment mid-morning here in Pittsburgh. If the doctors give him approval to play and he's cleared, he'll play tomorrow. He feels real good. He's gaining some of the weight back that he lost. He lost almost 12 pounds because of the broken jaw. But I would say that, and I talked with Sid about 2 weeks ago in Tampa, he was feeling a lot better then. He was actually surprised visit. He went and met the team down in South Florida for their road trip. So I would say that if the doctors give the approval, which sure sounds like they're going to, there's a real good chance he'll play tomorrow.
Pierre, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Let's do it again real soon.
My pleasure. Take care of yourselves. Good luck with everything.
Thank you, Pierre McGuire right there of NBC. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back right after these short messages.